Chapter 2, Salvation in the Hands of the Eldest Brother. The next day the guests left hastily, saying goodbye with compassion, hypocrite in many cases, of the old Marquis, and carrying with them the gossip that would spread across all the aristocratic salons of England, that would ruin the reputation of a noble and prestigious family, and would condemn to ostracism social a young innocent victim of the perversity of a bad man. Afternoon, Henry approached the servant he had been with that night before the incident. "Thank you very much for warning me, Sam. Thanks to that I saved my sister from the clutches of that damn bastard," said Henry. "I'm just sorry we did not get there before," replied Sam, the servant. "I hurt you?" Henry asked as he extended his arm as if to caress the servant's face, but stopped his hand near him. "No, it was just a small blow," Sam replied with a mocking and affectionate smile. Both men stared at each other for a few moments, and Henry made a point to shorten the distance between them, but Henry's wife appeared running. She stared at her husband and the other man, suspiciously and angrily, while both men sketched gestures of surprise and shame. But the woman soon said what she had come to say. "Henry, your father is going to kill your sister. Come soon," exclaimed the young woman, very thin, with pale skin, dark curly hair, and more or less graceful face. Henry ran out, and the woman shot a withering glance at the servant, who lowered his head, and then she rolled up her skirts and ran after her husband. In the library, the Marquis raised and lowered a leather belt that he held in one hand, mercilessly whipping his daughter, who was kneeling on the floor, and covering her head with her arms, while hiding her face in an armchair, so the spanking fell on her back covered by the thin fabric of the nightgown, and her delicate skin already showed in red the marks of the blows. "Enough, you're going to kill the girl!" The Marchioness screamed desperately, as she cried and stood between her daughter and her husband, but the Marquis gave her a whiplash that she received in the arm with which she covered her face, and then her husband pushed her violently and made her fall sitting on the floor, next to their daughter. "Damned dwarf cow! I should never have married you, and so this fool would not be my daughter, but to blows, I will remove that nature of slut to her," shouted the Marquis, and raised his arm to whip again his daughter, but the powerful hand of his son grabbed him and stopped him. "Did you go crazy? Do you plan to kill your daughter?" Henry yelled indignantly. "Get out or," replied the Marquis. "You will have to kill me to keep hitting my sister, or you to dare raise your hand against my mother," Henry exclaimed, snatching the belt from his father. "I do not care. If the doctor says that she is a harlot, I will kill her anyway," replied the angry Marquis. "Doctor? What doctor?" Henry asked, confused. "I have summoned a doctor to certify if she continues to be a virgin," said the Marquis in a cold and intimidating voice. "I already told you that for what she told me the worst has not happened," exclaimed the Marchioness, who, sitting on the floor, was hugging her daughter, who had taken refuge in her lap, sobbing. "It is nonsense, father. It's making things worse," Henry protested indignantly. "If the doctor certifies that she has lost her virtue, I will kill her or throw her out into the street like a street dog. If he certifies that she is still a virgin, that she did not have time to consummate her indecency, then I will send her to Jamaica with my sister, and she never will return to England," replied the Marquis. "Father, I understand what you feel, but that is not the way out. You are obfuscated, and that is why you do not think clearly," tried to reason Henry. "And what else can we do? No man of good family will want to marry her. Not after the scandal is known all over England. This stupid girl could marry some of the best suitors in England. Now we should bribe some poor loser, some ruined relative of some aristocratic family, some bastard without money who is willing to marry her for a reward, for my money. And anyway she would still be disgraced for the rest of her life. She has been ruined herself. The only solution is to exile her in a disgusting Caribbean island where the rest of her life will wither," said the Marquis, embittered and full of pain. "No, father, there is still a salvation for her and for our reputation," Henry replied decisively. "What solution?" replied the Marquis. "I can get the Duke of Wyre to marry Jane," said Henry sure and cold. The Marchioness and Henry's wife, who was standing behind her mother-in-law, were speechless. Jane raised her head and turned to see her brother with red and bloated eyes from so much crying, with an expression of bewilderment as if she did not understand anything that happened around her. The Marquis was confused, but his fierce face expressed suspicion. "The Duke of Wyre? William? Are you making fun of my boy?" the Marquis asked, clenching his right fist as if he wanted to hit his son. "No, father, in these circumstances, I would not make fun of anyone. I mean my friend William, whom you know as well as a son," Henry replied with apparent calmness. "But you said that he had sworn he would not marry again after the tragedy, that for nothing in the world he would marry again, and that he would die alone, in his refuge in the north. That man has lived almost like a hermit, many years that he did not visit London or anywhere in the south. And you say you can make him marry Jane?" the Marquis asked incredulously. "I can get it," Henry insisted confidently. "Even if he finds out about your sister's dishonour? Because the news of what happened here sooner or later will reach the noble houses of the north of England and even of Scotland," replied the Marquis. "Even if he finds out, he will," Henry said. "Silly stuff. You're lying to buy time," said the Marquis with scorn. "If I say I can do it, it's because I can do it. You know I do not promise what I cannot do," Henry exclaimed with vehemence, approaching a few steps to his father. "But I do not understand," exclaimed the Marquis, confused. "You do not need to understand, you just need results. Is not the Duke of Wyre one of the richest men in the country? His fortune is at least 4 times bigger than yours, father, his lineage is ancient and prestigious, is related to several English kings, and before what happened was very influential in the court. In the royal family they have him in high esteem. Can you imagine that a grandchild of yours is the heir of the title, the influence, and above all the fortune? It would be the most beneficial marriage for our family in generations, perhaps throughout our history," Henry argued convincingly. The Marquis relaxed a little and went to a window, as he always did when he was thinking. "What do you prefer, father? To exile Jane to a Caribbean island, or see her become Duchess of Wyre, probably her procreating the future Duke, who would be your grandson? Think also of the businesses we could do thanks to that link. Your father, my grandfather, would have seen all his ambitions fulfilled if that happened, and he would be proud of you," Henry said. "Certainly, it is a tempting offer, only to marry her with a king or a prince would be better than this," said the Marquis almost in a whisper, talking to himself, "but I cannot finish believing that William wants to marry," he added, turning to see his son. "And what do you have to lose by trying? Let me try it, father. If you give me your consent, I will go right now to the north to propose it to William, and you should not fear a rebuff from him, because it will be a secret management. You know that William and me are like brothers. In the worst case nobody will know of his rejection. But if he accepts, we will save our house from dishonour, we will shut mouths of people, and no one will dare to snub the new Duchess of Wyre and you, like her father," Henry replied in an almost authoritarian tone, similar to that of his father when he gave orders. The Marquis turned to see a few moments through the window and sighed. Then turned to see his son with a determined look. "Okay. You have my permission, you can speak in my name as the father of that ungrateful, dishonoured woman. I authorize you to propose to your friend William a marriage link with your sister. You can leave immediately. If he accepts, it is even possible that I will forgive your sister one day, and we will forget what happened last night, even if it is difficult, but if your friend refuses, your sister will be banished to Jamaica without any contemplation," said the Marquis in energetic and inclement tone. "All right, father. But if I get this, I will have proven my worth by saving this family from the most difficult trance in many years, and I hope that is recognized in its proper measure," Henry replied with a firm gaze. "And what do you want in return? No, you do not need to say it. You want me to give you control of the family's patrimony and support your modern business ideas. Okay, in any case, you will be the head of the family within a few years. I do not think I have many more years of life. I will delegate the management of everything to you, under my supervision of course, but I will let you implement your ideas, but if you fail you must wait a few more years to take command, replied the Marquis. Then we do not talk anymore, the cards are on the table. I'll leave as soon as possible, Henry said without hesitation, but I also have another condition. In my absence, I do not want you to mistreat Jane. You must leave her alone and not torment her. Give me your word, he added seriously. It's okay. As long as she does not speak to me and does not oblige me to see her frequently, I'll leave her alone. I cannot promise more, replied the Marquis angrily. And forget about the doctor. No doctor is going to put his dirty hands on my sister to sully her, certifying her virginity. Before I will kill him. She has already told our mother that she is still a virgin and I believe her, and in any case, the only one who has to care about that issue is her future husband, and I guarantee that there will be no problems, said Henry authoritarian. It's okay. No doubt you will enjoy commanding when you have my title, boy. I will order them to tell the doctor that his services are no longer needed and that they will pay his fees anyway, for the inconvenience caused. Something else? Replied the ironic Marquis. No, it's enough. I'll prepare myself to go north, said Henry. A couple of hours later, Henry went to his sister's bedroom to say goodbye to her, and she cried in pain before him, both standing. She was dressed in another nightgown and a robe over it, and Henry in proper riding clothes and high boots. Little sister, listen to me. I'm almost sure I can convince William, but if things go wrong, I'll send a message to Eleanor and she'll help you run away from home, to meet with people in whom I trust. In any case, no, I will allow our father to exile you, that he send you away from England, I promise, said Henry, affectionate and worried about her. I'm afraid, Henry. I'm very afraid. I do not know what's going to happen. I'm afraid of Papa, and I'm scared of that man. I do not know him, I do not know anything about him, and what little I've heard makes me very scared, Jane replied, crying and pouting like a little girl very scared, in a way that broke his brother's heart. Listen to me well, Jane. Henry said, cupping his sister's face between his hands and looking into her eyes with intensity, with a look full of love and compassion. William is a good man, is perhaps the best man I've ever met in my life. But he has suffered a lot, and sometimes even the best men become hard when they suffer too much, but under that shell of hardness, there is a good and noble man. If I did not believe it, I would not give my favorite sister, my little sister, to a bad man and cruel that could hurt her. He is not a monster. No matter what you hear, you must have faith in me and above all faith in him. William can be your salvation, and maybe you can be his, added Henry with his voice broken by the emotion and the wet eyes. But men are bad, Henry. After what happened, I'm afraid of getting married. I'm afraid of intimacy with a man, Jane said plaintively, remembering the horrible way she was treated by Thomas, as he was close to rape her. Jane, most men are not bad, you just had the bad luck to meet a bastard. Henry said, and his voice hardened with hatred when he referred to Thomas, but William is different. He has never been cruel or wicked, unless with an innocent woman. Saying this, Henry's voice faltered a little and his face outlined a significant gesture that Jane did not notice. But men are not bad, my little squirrel. I am a man, he added with a sweet smile. But you are my brother, Henry, said Jane, making a pitiful pout, which in other circumstances would be funny but in those was very moving. I think I have not been cruel to Eleanor. Henry scoffed, referring to his wife. My sweet girl, my little squirrel, do not worry, your brother will take care of you, and when you are Duchess, our sisters will die of envy, because their husbands cannot be compared to the one you will have, you'll see, he added, very affectionate and mocking in the end. Jane threw herself into his arms and hugged him tightly, sinking her face into his brother's chest. Henry caressed her like a small child or a delicate doll. Forgive me, Henry. Forgive me. I have disappointed everyone, Mama, Papa, you. I am a bad girl, a girl without decency or virtue, I have dishonored our family, said Jane, crying inconsolably. Don't say that, my little squirrel. My sweet girl, you are very innocent and pure, you are the best one in this family, you were deceived by a damn bastard who will one day know my revenge. By saying this, Henry's voice hardened, but you are still so sweet and innocent, William will be fortunate to possess you, and after all, you are not the first or the last person to commit sin because of the desires of the heart, or of the flesh, Henry added, and his face was covered with infinite sadness, while a tear ran through his cheek. A few minutes later Henry finished saying goodbye to his children, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. When the nanny took them, Henry said goodbye to his wife with a soft kiss on the lips. Henry, why do you have to take Sam with you and not another servant? Annoyed Eleanor asked. Because Sam is the most efficient and the one that knows me better, Henry answered with annoyance while putting on the gloves he wore when riding. But there are other servants, because... Eleanor replied. Enough, Eleanor. A long trip ahead awaits me, a trip on which depends on my sister's life and the future of this family, our future. I do not have time for nonsense, said Henry curtly. It's okay. Do what you like, as always. Have a good trip, said Eleanor and turned to walk inside the house. Henry left the house by the front door and descended the steps, while Sam waited for him with 2 stably boys and 2 strong and beautiful horses. At a signal from Henry, Sam mounted on one of the steeds, and Henry did on another, and they both began to ride slowly at first, at a trot. Henry, sorry to ask you, said Sam, turning to make sure that the stably boys were returning to the stables and could not hear how he spoke so familiarly with the young master, do you really think you can convince the Duke of Wyre to marry Lady Jane? I've known him since we were both children, and he's been the best friend I've had in my life, Henry answered, and his face darkened sadly as he said the last words. I'm almost sure I can get it, although perhaps I must resort to a weapon that I do not want to use, something that is very painful for him and me, and that can even be a bit immoral, and I fear that could endanger our friendship, added Henry, and his face hardened, showing a little of his inner storm. Sam knew from Henry's face that he should not ask about what he planned to use to convince or force William to marry Jane. We must ride without rest, stopping in the day just to eat and rest a little, and at night to sleep. I want to get to William's house as soon as possible, said Henry with seriousness and urgency. Both began to ride faster, and meanwhile Henry's mind traveled to the past, 2 painful memories. 11 years before. Henry walked through the courtyard of William's country house, toward the house, after a brief visit to the stables. On the way he saw the employees who had participated in the search in the river, sitting under a leafy tree, their clothes still covered with mud and soaked, they exhausted, while they drank drinks and ate snacks brought to them by some maids. He saw the deplorable state of his own clothes and felt the deep fatigue accumulated during the previous terrible hours. He saw a young maid sitting on some steps, crying, while another maid caressed her head. Henry knew that this maid was especially responsible for the child's care, clothes, and other needs, and that she was very close to him. Suddenly he felt like breaking down again, crying. When he entered, he felt chills when he felt the gloomy atmosphere that had taken over a house that had once been a happy place, that silence full of tension and the semi-darkness in which the residence was maintained. He walked a few steps, and on his way the butler crossed, his face pale and emaciated. Lord Henry. His Grace insists on not allowing them to wash the child's body and be dressed it to start the wake. Maybe if you talk to him, said the butler in a voice broken by emotion, but trying to calm down. I'll take care of it, Henry replied. When he reached the small room, he found William with his hands resting on the edge of the small table on which the body of his dead son was placed. Upon seeing the child's body, Henry felt his legs were missing and had to lean against a wall, while tears came out of his eyes. It felt like the first time he saw it. He also wanted the boy, who was his godson, and it broke his heart to see him dirty, covered in mud, with his body bruised and swollen, with his childish face so handsome and sweet now almost disfigured, to see him in way that William's men had finally found him at a point on the river bank, a long way from where the current had dragged him. Henry saw William's face in profile, his eyes red from crying, and that expression of pain, of immeasurable pain. Henry was not yet a father, and although he also heard a lot the death of the child, he could not imagine the pain of a father losing his son, and even worse in that cruel and horrible way. And Henry knew how William was attached to his son, and that was why he feared that this blow would lead him to insanity. The face of his friend had aged several years in one night, and in his eyes, it could see the terrible darkness that had taken possession of his soul, that storm inside him. "William, we must take care of Joseph. They have to clean him and dress him. It does not do you any good to retain in your memory this image of him. We must remember him as he really was, a very handsome boy," said Henry with a voice choked with tears. "Do you remember that when he was younger he loved to get dirty? He was always getting dirty, playing in the yard. The maids ran behind him trying to get him back home, and to wash and change, but he liked to go dirty, with his clothes covered in mud. My little wild," William said in a hesitant voice, but without breaking because he had already cried a lot during those hours. "Oh God, William!" Henry exclaimed, breaking into tears. "No, God is not here. He was too busy to save the life of an innocent child. Do you know why I have not let be taken away him? Because when they will wash him and dress him, and then they put him in an urn, and they take him to his grave, it will be the end. When I leave here to leave him in the hands of those who are going to clean him for his funeral, everything will be over. My son will be gone, it will be a reality, it will not be a nightmare," William replied. "William, I'm so sorry, said Henry. "Also, there's another reason. Seeing him like this, in this horrible way, I remember what they did to him. I remember what his assassins did. And I need that does not come out of my head," William said in a deadpan voice, but with the mien of his face full of rage. William bent down and kissed the forehead of his son, and whispered some unintelligible words. William and Henry were silent for a moment until the butler arrived. "Your Grace, the last group of servants returning from the forest is here. They found your horse, Intrepid," the butler said in a shy voice. The butler was referring to the beautiful black horse it had thrown William to the ground when he tried to force it into the river to help his son, and then fled to the forest, where it was wandering until the servants found it. William stroked his son's hair and then he left the room violently, brusquely brushing aside Henry and the butler. Both puzzled followed him. William went to another room and came out of it with an object in his hand, and then went out the main door of the mansion. A stably-boy, standing next to the animal, held the reins of the horse, and there were two servants around. But when they saw their master approaching them with what he had in his hand, they left scared. William put the gun barrel on the steed's head and pulled the trigger. The roar of the shot echoed in the courtyard, the cloud of fire and smoke came out of the mouth of the cannon, a little rain of blood and brains came out of the beast, and the horse fell down to the ground, convulsing a few moments before dying. Henry, the butler, and the servants stared stunned William, but he made his way back to the mansion. "We have to bury Joseph fast, then I'll go hunting his murderers," William said with a fierce expression on his face, and then went into the house. The copyright of this work is reserved by its author.
Efraín Jesús Jorge.